We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland out today. The dulcet tones of the Digby theme song. We're almost down to we don't have many people who have theme songs anymore. But
I'm honored.
Heather Parton, writer at salon.com, and also, of course, the proprietor of the Uber blog, Hullabaloo. Always great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Good to be here.
All right, let's start. I know you've been doing a lot of coverage of the Trump criminal trial. We just played a clip of Marjorie Taylor Greene in the Government Oversight Committee, which is ostensibly trying to subpoena or hold into contempt Merrick Garland for not releasing the special prosecutor's tape where he interviewed Joe Biden to prove that he's old or something. I don't know exactly what that was supposed to do. But Marjorie Taylor Greene took the opportunity to essentially audition. She was mad that she was left off the travel team to go and sit out in front of Donald Trump's courtroom and essentially go around the gag order. And she was trying to prove that she could do it better than Mike Johnson. She was very pissed that Mike Johnson was there. And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and so I just give us what you've got on this trial, because for me the funniest part was that they seem to be dressing like Donald Trump in some type of way to indicate that they're going around the gag order.
Well, I didn't necessarily know that it was a way to go around the gag order, but which of course is what they're doing. But it's also, it's just, this is the uniform now. Apparently, all they need is a red hat to really bring the whole thing off. It was stunning to see them all dressed in that blue suit with the red, with the standard Trump outfit costume. Apparently, I guess we all know what we're going as on Halloween. This whole thing of them traipsing down there. I actually called this ahead of time. I'm shocked. I'm not usually very good at predicting anything, but I did predict that when Rick Scott turned up, well, actually it was prior to that, Trump was whining to anybody who would listen about the fact that there were nobody was showing up to support him. And that includes the supporter, any protesters. And in fact, he's been lying and going out there and saying they're all here, but they won't let them in. But they're being left out because there's nobody there. I mean, there's 2 or 3 cranks with a Trump flag, and that's about it. And so he was upset, and he was saying that he wasn't getting enough support, and he wasn't getting enough political support. He felt like people had not really stepped up. This was all in the shadow of that big fundraiser that he had down in Mar-a-Lago where he called up had all the VP wannabes contenders show up in front of a bunch of rich donors, and he paraded them around like it was the Miss USA pageant.
I was going to ask, did they have to wear bathing suits?
Thank God that was not required, because I don't think anybody wants to see that. But
There's still time. There's still time.
There's still time. Yes, he hasn't picked yet. I mean, there's still going to be one more event. But so he had them all down there, and they were all doing their best Mike Pence impressions. And so when Rick Scott showed up, I'm going, oh, they've heard the call. And he showed up last week, and I said, well, just watch. All the VP wannabes are going to be here next week. They're all going to show up. And lo and behold, they did. And you had, Doug Burgum, the North Dakota.
Wait, put the picture. You can see them. They're all, look
at it.
Mike Johnson, to his credit, is wearing a red and blue tie.
Right.
Instead of just a red tie. But look at the Vivek. And who was that? Donald's? And
that's Donald's, Burgum, Vivek, and then Corey Mills, a rep from Florida.
Corey Mills, they're all wearing the Donald Trump outfit. It's just bizarro.
It is weird.
And Jimmy Vance did the same thing too when he was there.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. And in fact, they've even admitted, I can't remember who said it, but I read somewhere, one of them said, yes, well, we're doing this to show solidarity with Donald Trump. I mean, it's twisted. These are U.S. senators that we're talking about. Well, I mean, Corey Mills and Donalds are congressmen, but that's even so. I mean, these are national elected officials.
Well, they're adults too.
Yeah, they're supposedly.
That seems to be the bar for me.
Yeah. Well, that's about as I guess that's as much as we could hope for. That they would know how to dress themselves personally. Matt Gage showed up. He did the same thing yesterday. They have come down there with the intention. There are two parts to this. Three. The first is the VP wannabes, led by J.D. Vance, and Doug Burgum came down there. And, Tim Scott's going to have to really step it up here because he's been missing the boat. I'm sure he'll be there on Monday to show their solidarity and to sit behind Trump. Now, keep in mind that in a normal trial, the people sitting behind the defendant would be the family. But that's not really happening because it's such a disgusting trial and Melania is nowhere to be found. And the only kid that's turned up. Yeah, isn't that funny? She didn't. But, even in a normal trial, honestly, in a normal trial, even someone who is accused of something like this, I mean, they come out for serial killers. They come out for accused rapists. The family will come and sit behind them. And the defense attorneys normally really want them to do it, much less a defendant who's running for president. You would think that the family would just stand up behind him and say, this is a witch hunt and we're here for our father, but no, or our husband. But no, they're not. Eric's the only one who's shown up, and he's usually hanging around with the VP wannabes and the rest of the sycophants. And so that's part of it, is what they're showing up for is to show support, sitting behind him in the courtroom, that as if they are his family. They're his cult. They're not his family, but close enough for Trump. So they're coming for that. They're also coming to do the audition for the VP and to see how stridently they can support Donald Trump. J.D. Vance came out and said, well, I'm just here as a friend. We're here as friends. We're here as people who support Donald Trump in his time of need. And then, of course, the big reason that they're there, and really the one that is just most stunning that they're actually doing it, is to, do a end run around the gag order. They are saying out loud all the things that Trump is not allowed to say. And it's pretty grotesque what they're saying because, Trump and the rest of them, it's a witch hunt. It's, the prosecutor's crooked. The judge is, in the tank, whatever. They've actually gone out there and insulted the jury. They've gone out there and they have gone absolutely overboard on condemning the judge's daughter. I mean, they're going after his family in a way that is really pretty stunning. And that includes Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, who, to show his individuality and belief in personal freedom, he wore a blue and red tie instead of a red tie because he's special. He's important. Yeah, he's an important guy. And he was he went gangbusters after the judge's daughter. And they're all making a fake claim that she's making millions of dollars as a lobbyist or something. That's which isn't true. So this is what they're doing. To be fair to Johnson,
Trump did basically intervene on his behalf with Marjorie Taylor Greene on the vote to boot him essentially and to vacate. And this is you really couldn't write and I feel like maybe there has been some writers, and I'm thinking I can't remember the name of that guy, but the Magic Christian or something like that. The guy who wrote that, this type of thing where you would have all of these politicians show up dressing like you. I mean, this is This is like the way that you would write it in a sort of satirical fashion. These authoritarians.
Exactly. Terry Southern or somebody like that. Yeah. One of those guys. Yeah. The true satire. It's quite unbelievable. And even I, with all of my cynicism and I have have absolutely no doubt that the right is at this point, that the Republican Party is capable of anything. Even that even surprised me, because I have to say that when they wore the outfits and you see these pictures, the picture that you put up there was, and by the way, that particular picture, this is a thing that they do. Apparently, they all show up. They go into a holding room with Donald Trump. They come into a different, all these politicians come into a different door than the public does. So it's not like they're a member of the public. They come in, and then they all, as they're going into the courtroom, Donald Trump comes out and he stands in the hallway and he makes some ridiculous statement, and they all line up behind him every morning, standing there. And it's creepy, you know. I mean, it's kind of like this weird, I mean, it's very creepy. In fact, some movie the other day, it was, I can't think of the name of it. It's some horror movie that they've got out. They were doing some viral promotion, and they showed up in the protest zone, and they're like monsters, and they have these strange like sheets, you know, hoods over their head and stuff like that, and they're sort of standing there in a line in the background at the protest. I thought it was pretty clever, because people were going, what the hell is that? That's what these guys are like. They're like zombies standing behind there. You know, it's very bizarre. And of course, you know, I mean, it's just the blatant just degradation of any sense of adherence to the rule of law, or any of the normal rituals that usually go around something as serious as a criminal trial. I mean, you know, it's serious. And I mean, they'll do the same. And if there's ever a federal trial, or there's the Mar-a-Lago espionage, you know, documents trial, if those were going on, they do the same thing, by the way. This doesn't have anything to do with the fact that it's the New York hush money trial. This is just defending Donald Trump, you know, no matter what, and subverting the gag order that he is under, so that they can go and basically threaten witnesses and threaten the judge's family and the jurors. And that is just sick. I mean, it's really sick. And these guys are all, I shouldn't say guys, there's some women there too. Lauren Boebert made quite a show.
Did Boebert show up
yesterday.
there? Was she?
Oh yeah, she was there.
Marjorie Taylor Greene must be enraged.
She must be so upset. And I think you're right. You know, I hadn't even thought of that last night, that it was it was, hey, remember me? I know how to bring it.
Oh,
you know,
100%.
Don't you want me there?
She had gone on with Bannon 2 days ago and said, like, what's Mike Johnson doing there? That's a city, that's a municipal case. We can stop the Jack Smith thing. That's a federal one. He should be back down here doing it. And then all of a sudden she's bringing up in that committee about the judge's daughter. Yeah. And you know, that's what she was doing. That was just like, somebody clip this and send this to Trump, and maybe she'll get there on Monday. I wouldn't be surprised. Of these clowns, all again.
I mean, look at them.
And
so it's Anna Paulina Luna, Andy Ogles from Tennessee, Matt Gaetz, Andy Biggs from Arizona, and then Eli Crane from Arizona, and Boebert's right next to him. There's one more behind Biggs. I just don't recognize him.
I wonder, Mike Pompeo was down at Liberty University, giving a speech. Maybe we have a clip of that. Do we have a clip of that? He wasn't there, but he's trying to, I think, get back into the running. Maybe. Oh, yeah. Here's Mike Pompeo, who apparently is in contention for another job in the next Trump administration, if there is one. God help us. And here he is at Liberty University, just so that we can catch up on some of the band is trying to get back together.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got the Govney going on, or the Ozempic. That's going around in those circles. Here he is.
I made two decisions in my life as a young person that changed it forever. First was enrolling at West Point and being lucky enough to get in. And the second one happened at West Point as well. It's where I gave my life to Jesus Christ. And we are particularly great because our founding principles, the things that makes this nation unique, are tied to fundamental Judeo-Christian truths that you all know and are living out. And it's for this reason that our country will always be under assault by dark forces that seek to tear us down. We can see this. You all are going to come into a world where Russia and China and Iran, they're all eager to chip away at our Judeo-Christian founding. They want to see an America in decline. They want to destroy the very freedoms that we are celebrating here today. And they want to drive our nation away from the Lord. We can never let that happen.
Okay, I mean, I bring that up only because, when you've got a top national security contestant who's talking about this country is all about our protecting our Judeo-Christian values from the dark forces. At least he was kind enough to throw in Russia, and China into the Iran in there. But of course, there's a reason why he's talking like that as stuff is going on in Gaza and Israel, and making it clear where he's going to stand on these issues.
Oh, there's no doubt. Yeah.
But the Christian nationalism that is tied into this is Mike Johnson is up there, and the Democrats saved him. Was it the beginning of this week or was it last week? From the motion to vacate, and I think they did so because probably as payoff from the debt deal on some level. But this is a very scary time when you've got like a crew of authoritarians going down to protest essentially out in front of this criminal case, and the sort of like convergence of Christian nationalism around these clear authoritarians. Give me your sense of like, what are the implications of this case really ultimately? I mean, we dip into it, but we don't follow it that much because my feeling is that he's not going to go to jail. If he gets convicted, he's going to be out on bail for a while, and they're not going to put him in jail before then. He's figured out a way to avoid jail with the gag order. How much do you think this is going to implicate the election, if at all, regardless of what happens?
It's hard for me to say. I mean, look, first of all, it's hard to believe that it wouldn't, because, this is a criminal trial. If he's convicted, the idea that the Republican candidate for president is a convicted felon would be kind of a shocking, unprecedented sort of development. But then what isn't when it comes to Donald Trump?
Right.
So I don't hold out any hope that this suddenly that, the country will be shocked into reality and go, oh my God, this is terrible. We can't do that. So I don't know about that. I do think there's a possibility, and this is just from what we're seeing, not in the polling, because the polling, I don't even, pay that much attention to it at this point, but the elections that we've had, the primary elections that we've had over the course of the last few months, and the special elections that have happened this year in 2023, show that there is a group of people who are leery of Donald Trump. Now, they are people who...
You're talking about the Republican primaries.
The Republican primaries.
The other day in, was it in Maryland?
Maryland,
I mean, she got something like 20% of the vote. She wasn't even on the ballot.
No,
I think
it was a closed primary. So the idea that these are Democrats, or that the Democrats are meddling in the primaries. I mean, they could be in some states, but this is across the board. I mean, even a place like Nebraska, that she is getting in, high double digits, and or rather, double digits. And that is surprising to me at this point, because we're dealing with Donald Trump. Now, any normal, you might sort of dismiss that if it was normal politics, where there's a disagreement over some kind of a policy, or there's some kind of a protest vote against Donald Trump because of some, or there was another candidate that they just really loved, like in 1980 with, Ted Kennedy, that there was a group of people who just fanatically loved the alternative. But that's not really the case with this. This is just, Nikki Haley, nobody loved Nikki Haley. She was just the last person standing, and she's the one who got the votes of the people who who weren't happy with Donald Trump. So just, not to belabor that, but it tells me something is within the Republican coalition, that there is a possibility of some people on the margins shaking loose because of what's happening with the trial, and the idea that, you're seeing these guys traipse down there in their little red tie uniforms, and that, that the cult of Donald Trump, which of course encompasses most of the Republican Party and apparently the entire Republican establishment now, it is completely on board with this, that there may be some people around the edges who might be affected by a conviction, what I wonder is what happens if he is acquitted or if there's a mistrial. And that's certainly possible. I mean, this case, I mean, anything can happen in any case. I mean, if it was, a slam dunk, you probably wouldn't even have a trial, right? I mean, it would just be a guilty plea or something. But, there's a good possibility that he'll be acquitted here, or that they'll split the baby and decide that the case is really a misdemeanor and the felonies don't matter. Or there might be a mistrial. There could be one or two people on there that just go, nah, I'm not really buying it. So when that happens, I am really wondering what goes on there, because it should, you would think would, galvanize the left, or the Democrats. I shouldn't call it the left, but the Democrats. I just wonder if it will just, it'll be so enervating to see him get away with it one more time that people will just kind of throw up their hands and go, what is the point here? Why am I bothering?
Well,
I worry about that.
I guess my feeling is I don't know. I think I don't think it's going to have that impact. I mean, because on some level, like, there is nothing that we can do. I mean, this is why I don't really spend too much time covering it, because it's really up to the judge and jury at this point, and sort of like some sensibility outside of the fact. I mean, the guy's obviously guilty of fraud here. I mean, it's obvious.
Of course.
And
he's also guilty of being completely unfit to be president of the United States. And this just we know that, but this now it's in a formal legal setting, where this stuff that he did, this is the guy who came out and has called the media fake news from the moment that he came down that escalator. Fake news, fake news. This trial has proved that he and a tabloid gossip monger, David Pecker, the head of the National Enquirer, the publisher, actually created fake news.
Yes,
they put together fake stories about his rivals and put them in the newspaper. That is fake news. I mean, to me,
it's like the Ted Cruz you're talking about, like Ted Cruz's dad.
Cruz, Marco Rubio was in a pool with a bunch of guys doing drugs, apparently. And of course, Hillary Clinton, that went on for months. This was literally fake news that they concocted. And Pecker, he testified to that. Michael Cohen did. They put those stories together. Trump was thrilled. And, let's do the Lee Harvey Oswald thing, with Ted Cruz. And here's this guy who said fake news. So, I mean, that kind of thing, I know it's all baked in, and we've seen this guy for years, and nothing new under the sun. But still, it's something to see in a formal setting, that being, brought out under oath with people are actually testifying, in front of a judge.
All right, so I want to just pivot, because we got this. We're going to have debates, which I think was not a. I mean, I think it would have been hard to imagine having no debates, but I think it was definitely a possibility. Joe Biden comes out, challenges Donald Trump to a debate. One's in June. We've never had that before. Yep. I mean, it's before they're actually the nominees. And then one in September. And I can understand the idea, like, we want to do this before early balloting happens. Although I suspect that's not actually the reason. I'm not sure I know the actual reason, to be honest with you. But it could be before early balloting, but it's hard to imagine that, the debate is going to change anybody's mind per se. But I can't help but think that really the reason, the idea behind having it in June, is because I think I am of the mind that the trial is actually helping Donald Trump only because it's keeping him off the campaign trail. And like, unless you're like, the stories about Trump are about everybody around him except for Trump. All Trump gets is that 60 seconds out in front saying the same old thing over again, as opposed to, like, let the American public see this guy out there again and remember what.
I agree with you.
Why he was voted out. And I have a feeling that the Biden people want to get him back in the news early as possible.
I agree. I mean, and I agree totally with the idea that him being kept off the campaign trail, him just doing these sort of canned, press avails, not even avails, these sort of little, statements in the hallway at the courthouse. I think that's helping him. I do think that helps him because, I mean, if you don't, people have, and this is showing up in the polling all over the place, that, that people have some weird sense of nostalgia about the good old days when Donald Trump was president. And that's because they've forgotten what it was like when Donald Trump was president. It was not good. His approval rating was terrible through his entire presidency. I mean, not that Biden's is any better, but it's not like, Trump's was great and everybody was just super happy. And so they need to be reminded of that. And I think you're right. I hadn't thought about that, but I think maybe, I'm sure that's part of the calculation, that they need to get him out there. Then people need to see him, because the fact is that if you do see him, that is, I watched his whole rally over the weekend, and he is, he's not the same person that he was 8 years ago. He is not, his act is not as fresh, let's just put it that way. And he does not seem to be, very together in terms of, his, I don't know if it's the stress or his age or he's got something wrong with him or whatever, but he does not present the way that he did. And I think that people need to be reminded of just how, what a train wreck this guy is. And, I think Biden will do fine in the debates. He's actually not bad. And I mean, Biden's, kind of a terrible, speech maker, and in a lot of ways, but he's pretty good in debates. I mean, I remember that in 2008, that, he was the one who got off the line about Rudy Giuliani. That was, sort of stuck with him, a noun, a verb, and 9/11, he said, he can be pretty good. And Trump, of course, will not prepare and won't know what's going on. And, hopefully the debate has been structured in a way, which it sounds like that Biden really did get what they needed on that, by, apparently no audience, which is really important. And also the idea that they can cut off the mics, because Trump was absolutely outrageous in the last debate that he had with Biden in the 2020 debates. So, I think it's a good idea. And I think it's good, that Biden's polling bumped up after the State of the Union when people saw that he wasn't really drooling and falling down on his face, which is what they, everybody was anticipating. And apparently, I just read this today, that, Google searches on Biden and age dropped precipitously after the Supreme.
That was the one thing that the State of the Union did for him, is it changed that
right.
that whole narrative. So what do you make about having it so early, though? I mean, if part of it is this idea, someone just I am saying that maybe this is a function of, like, getting locked in to the DNC, for the DNC convention.
Yeah,
but
it's locked in. I mean,
it's locked in.
It's locked in. That's not going to happen.
I mean, look at the numbers that he's getting in these primaries, and it's really uncommitted is really been the biggest challenger to him. And that is, largely a function of not largely, it's totally a function of, I think, of what's going on in Gaza. But that is, if anything, I think it's more, they want the ability to take part of that convention online and have it much less relevant
that's interesting. That's interesting.
For TV, because I think they rightly are concerned about protests.
For sure.
I mean, Biden is speaking at Morehouse this weekend.
Yeah.
At the commencement, and the president of Morehouse has said, "I'm not going to call the cops on protesters. I'm asking people not to protest, because if they protest, we're going to stop the commencement.
Right.
We're just going to stop it right in its tracks and walk away." And my God, I mean, if I'm Biden's people, I'm like, can't we just do the cops keep people from coming in, or can't we search everybody? Or I don't know if that commencement's going to go through, and it's going to be, it's going to create, hopefully, I want there to be as much pressure on Biden about this as possible, but I would imagine they don't want this with the convention. They want as little attention on the conventions as possible.
Sure. Well,
And
there's also another thing, and I think you're right about that. I think they are trying. I hadn't thought of it, but you're absolutely right. They are trying to make the convention less relevant, and maybe less of a television event, so that they can preclude any kind of big disturbances that could shake things up. There will be protests, whether they like it or not, and they will be covered, whether they like it or not. So that's happening. The media is not going to ignore the protests; they just aren't. So I don't think that that's necessarily going to work. But they'll do what they can, I guess, to try and keep it from being the main story. But I also think there's another thing, which is also part of the polling, which is that a lot of people have not been convinced that Donald Trump is actually going to be the nominee for whatever reason, whether they're not paying attention, or they don't really understand how politics works, or they think that there's some kind of mystery or suspense about whether or not Trump is actually running. Maybe it has to do with the trials. Some people think, if he gets convicted, then he can't run or something. So I think the Biden people find in their polling that for those who have not been convinced that Trump is going to run, if they become convinced, they get sober up real fast and make a decision to run to go to Biden. So they may want to do that, to just have it be a formal kind of
get Trump
event.
out there early, so
Get
that
him
you're not
out
waiting
there.
until October till people realize that there's an election going on.
Yeah,
because it has been.
remind-
I mean, I that to me makes a lot of sense, because I have to say that, like, this now being 04, 08, 12, 16, 20, this being the sixth presidential election, and you're in the same boat. This is our sixth one in this sort of like business, as it were. And I don't recall one having this little interest. Like, I mean, sort of around the, and part of it is because the primary really never developed on either side in any
Right.
real meaningful way. And we've never had two presidents before, and two people that I think are so sort of like universally disdained in some fashion, or unpopular. And it just seems like people are just staying away and ignoring this, which, at any other time, I would have been like, good, we should only have a 5-month, 4-month presidential election instead of this like 6-year one that we have. But from the perspective of the Biden campaign, I would imagine they're running on a referendum about Donald Trump. And it's much harder to have a referendum about Donald Trump where he's only on TV for 4 seconds a day in the same courtroom every week. I mean, I think that's got to be part of it. But let me ask you this in terms of the way that Biden's running, because there was also a story. I mean, that Times poll that came out, they really hyped the registered voters instead of their own voter model. And, everybody's got voter models and no one knows what it is. And their voter model was, they were predicting record turnout relative to 2020. And again, it's hard to believe that there's going to be more excitement than there was in 2020, because, like I say, nobody wants either one of these candidates.
I really think that's off base.
I just, if it's possible, it's possible. I mean, who knows? I'm not.
It could be.
And
who knows?
But if you look at like the aggregate of the polls, they're more or less tied. It seems like.
That's what they are.
But one of the things that I find a little bit disturbing is that there's a lot of talk out of the Biden campaign that they just don't believe they're in any type of trouble whatsoever. And who knows? Again, the demographics could determine it. The cohorts that Biden won with last time, he's got a lot of margin to, if he won 65-35, 18 to 35s last time, he could still win with 55-45 because there's just so many more of those people.
Right.
Because that generation's gotten so much bigger. But what do you think about the campaign he's running? Because it seems to me there is a huge missed opportunity when you look at those splits in that New York Times thing. All of the Democratic senators running in these swing states are crushing it relative, these are the most vulnerable
Which is
Democrats.
surprising. Yeah,
It's surprising, but it's consistent with what you said earlier about the way that Democrats are performing in the special elections and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't Biden running against the biggest do-nothing Congress in the history of do-nothing Congresses? Like every day, we just played that clip from what, James Comer was doing. Why are they not running against that Congress on some level? It's like they're afraid to take the focus off of Trump, but he's not around right now.
Right. And this is a perfect opportunity because the Congress is run against Marjorie Taylor Greene, run against Mike Johnson, run against Matt Gaetz. I mean, these people, who likes those people? I mean, other
Lauren
than a small...
Boebert.
Yeah, Lauren, but these are clowns. They're completely, outrageous, kind of performance artists there in the Congress. And I agree with you. It's like a Harry Truman sort of a thing, where you come out, run against the do nothing Congress. And that is a story I think that people are aware of. I mean, from what I can gather, the Republican Congress, the House, is extremely unpopular, in the polling. I mean, this is not a group of people that I don't even think Republicans like these people. At least not, they love Donald Trump, but they don't love Marjorie Taylor Greene or even Mike Johnson or Matt Gaetz. So I think you're right. I think that is a missed opportunity because, it's one of the things, if you want to run a referendum campaign, you can run the Trump is a given, and that will unfold as the rest of the campaign comes. But right now, they do have that Congress that's right out there making fools of themselves every single day, and they're tied directly to Donald Trump. It's not like it's some kind of a separate thing. You can make that case, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't know that they actually believe that they don't have any trouble in the polling. I find that hard.
Right,
to believe,
I find it hard to believe that too.
I'm
but
sure
they're not doing anything.
No,
as far as I can tell about it.
What they're doing, and there is, they are putting together a very, huge ground operation with offices open everywhere all over the country, and they're hiring tons of people and that kind of stuff. So there is some under the radar sort of stuff that's going on. But on the surface, no, you're not seeing it, and you're not seeing the energy, I think, that what we really need to see, this kind of energy that, look, this is really serious, folks, and we are out here and we're going to work hard for all your votes. Now, Biden is spending a lot of time in the swing states. I mean, he's been in Wisconsin. He's been living up there so far, and in Michigan and Pennsylvania, too. I mean, those three states are vital. He has to win them or he loses. I mean, that just goes without saying. So they are working them. But, you're just not feeling that kind of energy. And I agree with you. I think there are ways to go about this with Trump being in the position that he's in that could be quite effective in garnering attention of the voting public. And,
it seems to me too, that one element of why that excitement is sort of muted, or excitement may be the wrong word, or sense of urgency is, we look at the polling in terms of Biden's policy regarding Israel, and the polling itself, the first order, getting votes doesn't seem like it's a massive problem for him there. But what I think is sort of not clear is what it's doing to the activist class, the people who are in charge of these organizations, and the people who are the ones who are supposed to be like, in the absence of what's going on with the Biden administration in Israel right now, I'd be talking about cutbacks on new leases for coal. I'd be talking about the liquid natural gas pause on the export facilities. We would be maybe pushing a little bit more on the student debt relief, and marking where it's happened in some instances. I mean, there would be a whole host of things that we would be talking about. Because on a domestic standpoint, like, you and I have been through this a lot of times. It's hard to point to a president in our lifetime that has done better, and certainly in terms of like labor and antitrust, but it's really hard to, trumpet those things where he's engaged in something so blatant as, setting up these sort of like, I don't know, very, very faded red lines that seem to sort of dissolve about Israel's behavior, and trying to sort of both sides this with his donors, or his own ideological marriage to this project. But it's extremely difficult to do, and I think that's where it's very hard to quantify that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, I went to a fundraiser not long ago, a couple of weeks ago, for one of the, it was one of those resistance groups that, came up after Trump was elected. And they're, by the way, they're still out there, and they're still doing their work of registering voters and getting people out. But I was at this fundraiser, and the person was there from the group. I might as well name the group. It's called Flip the Vote, which is, they go into these swing states and are trying to flip votes in there. But, I'm in a group of people. I'm on the west side of LA, pretty liberal place. Everybody's, but, these were all people who were just sort of, not particularly politically engaged. And I'm telling you, the Gaza thing was a hugely contentious issue in this group of people. And that had an effect on the person who was doing the presenting, because you could see that they were kind of going, wow, this is an issue. Now, granted, I'm in a very liberal place. There was a lot of probably more informed people than you might find around in your average swing state. I don't know.
But that's the point of activism. I mean, that's the point. The activist class who are doing this are the most informed, and they're the ones who are probably dealing with this more than anybody else.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, this was a very contentious discussion that was had. People were, kind of emotional about it. And this is a group that goes into these, it's the activists in the swing states who are out there trying to convince people. If they are, demoralized in some way, or find themselves just, maybe I got something else to do with my life right now. I'm going to go, or maybe they go protest, or maybe they just do something else and decide not to do this. Now, I agree with you that so far I see a separation between the protests, which I think are sincerely and genuinely out there to change policy. This is an action to change policy, and I think it's having an effect. I think that it has had an effect. I think it gives, to the extent that Joe Biden wants to do anything, that's very helpful to have a very vocal group out there making this demand on him. It makes it easier for him to do that if he wants to. We don't know to what extent he wants to.
To some extent, it forces him, I think, because it's created a panic amongst a lot of the lawmakers too.
That's right. And it's very important that, that is the function of it's the old apocryphal story that FDR said, when they came in and made the demand, he said, well, go out and make me do it. Well, that's what this is. That's what protests are about. These sort of internecine arguments that happen is to do that. Having said that, I don't see any sort of sense that people are in great numbers confusing their strong feelings on that with their knowledge that Donald Trump is, a fascist nightmare, and that, they would instead vote for him. I don't see that happening, but, there could be a fall off in voter participation. And that just been in this situation, because it's like you said, the polls show a tie, and I don't get the sense that that's going to change a whole lot over the course. I mean, a lot of this is just baked in. We're doing a rerun of 2020.
Well,
so,
there is a difference, and we don't have time to talk about it, but maybe next time you're here. And that is RFK's running mate just gave him another $10 million. This is sort of like very reminiscent of when I think it was David Koch bought his way onto the Libertarian vice presidential ticket back in I think it was in 1980, maybe, or 82. I think it was 80. And she is, she's a member of a one-person club, and the dues are very, very high.
Yes, they are. But she's got it. She's got it. She's got the money.
She's got the money, and if you're going to spend that kind of money in politics, you might as well take a vice presidential nomination. Sure. But he's going to be on a bunch of ballots, and
yes, he is.
I don't think he's going to be in the debate, but maybe somebody's going to invite him to a debate. I
Well,
don't
Trump
know.
says Trump wants him on. He
I
says,
know,
"Come on,"
and
he's
I don't
ready
know
to
that
have him.
Biden does, but that's the one thing that is
Yep,
also different
you're
than this is
absolutely
not
right.
a rerun in that way, because
Yep,
this is gonna
you're
have
right.
some implications. Because even if
Yeah,
they,
I'd love to talk to you about this because I know you know him, and
Yep.
it would be very interesting to me to hear your take on how
I
this
don't
is
know if I have
unfolding.
any insights on it. We've talked about it a little bit around here, but at the end of the day, I do think that, like, even with this vote to force Biden to fund Israel more, essentially, Biden can't tie the Republican Party to Donald Trump, or he won't. And it seems to me to be a huge mistake. But
Absolutely.
we'll have to pick this up later.
Okay.
Heather, as always, a real pleasure.
Oh, thanks for having me, Sam. Have a great weekend, everybody.
You too.